Welcome to Biz Dev Live. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, on LinkedIn, wherever you're tuning in from, make sure you get into those comments. Today's show is all about connection. So make sure, right, you're connecting. Make sure section and engaging, ask those questions. How do you remember names, right? We heard that from one of the community members of Michelle's before this. Get those questions into the chat so that Michelle can answer those questions. Networking is such a vital skill for you through your life. It always pays to get better at it. That is what today's show is all about. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the Biz Dev Live theme. Don't forget to post in the chat where you're tuning in from.
Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time, live. Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration, Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, business development, not even selling it. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. This is business development, not even selling it. This is business development, not even selling it. Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live. This is business development, not even selling it.
Michelle Tillis Lederman, one of Forbes' top 25 networking experts and MG100 Coach, is the author of 4 books, including the internationally known The 11 Laws of Likability and her latest, The Connector's Advantage. Michelle is a connection creator and CEO of Executive Essentials, which provides customized communications and leadership programs for Fortune 500 nonprofit, university, and government clients. A former finance executive and NYU professor, Michelle is a regular in the media, appearing on NBC, CBS, Fox, NPR, The Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNBC, and others. Michelle is known for helping people work better together and advance their individual impact. Please welcome to the show the amazing meeting professional, Michelle Tillis Lederman. Thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Excellent. So I want to get into this right away. Tell me how you are helping people right now, and then we'll get into some of the backstory.
You know, my kid once asked me what I do. And when he was like 8 or 9 years old, the way I explained it was simply, I help people play nicer in the sandbox.
I love that. And so what just, and I know we have the books and I know that you do the executive consulting, but just walk people through that really briefly. How do you do that? You know, when you're talking with companies, when you're talking with individual small businesses, how are you actually doing that?
There's a lot of different ways to skin that cat, but helping organizations become more connected to their teams, to their brand, to their message. So the thread is always connection, and creating connected cultures and connected leaders are key elements in that retention, that engagement, that loyalty, that productivity. And so how we do it, it's through changed behavior. And whether we're speaking, training, or coaching, it's all helping individuals with their own growth.
I love that. And so I'm sure that little Michelle, that's what you were born to do. And so like 5, 6 years old, this is the path you are on, right? Or was there a different track to this point in your life? What motivates you? Talk to us about this story.
Well, it's funny because, right before we came on, you said, I'm going to ask you what you wanted to be when you grew up. And the first thought that came to my mind was financially stable. Like that's what I wanted. I wanted to not be how I was as a child, as an adult, in terms of not having that financial security. When I was in 6th grade, I wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't want that, that salary. And so I actually went into finance. And I I think a lot of times we make decisions as anecdotes to something that was missing in our life, whether it's a relationship or it's the profession. We are choosing something to fulfill something that's missing. And I went into finance because that was a path to financial security. And the other thing we do is we make choices based on what we're good at. And I am photographic for numbers and apparently highly analytical. Not that I have any idea what that meant or looked like, but I was told it my whole life. And so this is something that came easy to me. I was good at it. It gave me that lifestyle I was seeking. And that's how decisions are made. But it took a long time for me to realize that it didn't have any heart or passion or meaning for me.
And what did your parents do? And I'm just curious, as you were sort of seeing your talents and you were saying to yourself that you wanted to be financially stable, what was your kind of parents' influence on you as you were growing up?
Well, I was actually the first person in my family to graduate from college. The only other person in my family to graduate from college is my mom, who graduated at the age of 54, a couple years after I did. So my dad was...
That's amazing, by the way. Congratulations to Mom.
Yes, we were so proud. We threw a big party. So my mom was in real estate because my dad started a real estate company. But she didn't like it because she felt she was trying to convince people to buy something they didn't need or want. And so she, as the nurturer that she is, ended up working for the Newark County Courthouse in New Jersey as a judge's secretary. Then she worked in welfare and food stamps and basically always trying to help people. And my dad, although originally a chicken farmer with his egg business, ended up, again, not going to college and wanted a career that he also grew up without financial security, and he wanted to find that in his life. And so he was in real estate.
Love it. And so take us forward here. I mean, amazing that you were able to kind of change the history of the family, right? Always great when somebody's able to kind of move up and beyond. I think as parents, we're always looking for our kids to have, take the next step, right? The things that we didn't do, the care, the support that we didn't receive necessarily, right? And so we love to see the children succeeding. What was your thinking about what you were going to spend your life doing while you were in college and beyond?
So I actually went to college thinking I'm going to be an accounting major. I was a TA in high school. It came so natural to me. It was easy. I got it. It was a great foundation, accounting. And people always said to me, "You don't seem like an accountant." And I was like, I'm going to break the mold. Well, the mold kind of broke me. I did go into accounting. And at first it was kind of really collegial and I loved that. But I found that anytime I showed up to a client, they didn't want me there. And, my sensitive soul, I was like, but I have donuts, but I have jelly beans. How about bagels?
Yeah, I would be that guy. I talk about it on this show, but the hardest part of running a business has always been the financial side. And I've had such a tough time with accountants. I don't know what my exact response to jelly beans would have been, but I know my response to the financial paperwork and the thought of doing a lot of that stuff is something that it literally drives me crazy. So I know what you're talking about in terms of the client that may not want you there, right? We don't want to deal with those things that we're not excited about, especially as entrepreneurs. We want to be deep diving into the things that we're passionate and that we like doing within the business, not necessarily counting the beans.
Well, okay, as an auditor, which is what I was, we show up and we're looking for people's mistakes. So people don't want us there.
Yeah.
And it's really just kind of checking a box. And I kept looking for something that had more meaning. And I went into mergers and acquisitions. I did financial consulting. I tried a lot of different aspects of the finance career. In between all that, I got my MBA at Columbia Business School. And, I did a venture capital, mergers and acquisitions internship. And that was kind of fun. And I kept thinking, I can't describe what I do without the word money. Right. So I'm either counting somebody's money, I'm saving somebody money, I'm making myself some money, I'm, avoiding paying money. It was and it just didn't, again, I thought solving problems, consulting, it just never had it. And so my life actually started when I got laid off. And I know for a lot of people out there that are thinking about that leap, if they're not yet the entrepreneur that they are, desiring to be. I wasn't desiring to be an entrepreneur. Both my father and my sister are entrepreneurs. And my dad always said, work for yourself. And I was thinking, nah, I'm good working for somebody else, taking my vacation.
I like the check. I like the benefits. Yeah.
I like leaving work at work. Of course, I'm an entrepreneur now. Somehow parents know best. But I really thought about that leap. And when we think about, that change that we're making for those that haven't yet done it, it isn't necessarily a leap. I kind of did a step. And so when I was unhappy, I thought, well, what do I want to do? And we think about our passions. And when we are passionate about something, that whole line about when you do something you love to do, you're not working a day in your life. That's not true. You are working, but it has meaning. And that's the difference. That's the driver. So if we roll back, I got laid off and I was like, what do I do now? And this is a little bit of the beginning of how I understood what I teach now, which is the connector's advantage of faster, easier, better results through relationships. And I got laid off on a Monday. I called my friend from business school on Tuesday and said, guess what? I'm cleaning out my desk. I just got laid off. And the first thing out of his mouth was, come work here. I was just like, I just wanted to get drunk with you, but what would I do there? So Wednesday I go to his office. We chat about it. He goes, come back tomorrow to meet my boss. Thursday I go meet his boss. And an hour and a half later, he's like, so can you start tomorrow? And I'm never speechless, like almost never speechless. And I think I just jaw dropped and had an open mouth because I was like, can I have the weekend? And my friend stepped in and said, let's give her till Monday. And I ended up starting on Monday at a new gig as a consultant for a bank, and I was still on payroll. So, and I love Alexandra saying, I love being a connector. Me too, because when you're a connector, you're putting relationships first, and these things happen not because you were trying for them, but because you built those great relationships. So I'm with you there. So I ended up working for this bank, and while there, my boss, who was the treasurer of the New York office, became the CEO of the Tokyo office. And he said, go out there and teach them all what it's like to work for me. I was like, okay. I hired a coach to go with me. I did everything she did and then some. And at the end of the week, I said to the CEO, I can do that. And he said, okay, but you still have to do all this being the hedge fund investing, the risk management, the special projects. I said, okay, deal. And so as we think about that shift from, working for somebody else to working for ourselves, I did it internally. I started building what I wanted to do and having that vision of being a coach and being a trainer and teaching, which is what I wanted to do back in 6th grade. Right.
And I want to say this, I want to highlight this too, because if there's somebody that's watching this show that's currently in a job, or even if you're an entrepreneur and you're not loving the things that you do in your role, I think, the wrapping your head around the thinking that you don't have to do those things that you don't like is a big deal, right? I mean, whether it's reading Timothy Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, where he talks about really outsourcing the things that, and talking about it in a way of like, you should outsource the things that you don't want to do, because if you're focusing on those things that you actually enjoy doing, then it's a lot more fun. If you can reduce down the dredge work, the things that you hate, the things that you put off anyways, and get those out, you'll be a much more efficient human being, as well as a happier human being, right?
Yeah, but I don't want people to think that, as an entrepreneur or doing work that you love doesn't mean that you're not working. You are. We work hard, but we work hard because we have that drive and that passion for that mission, that vision that we are creating for ourselves. And I always say, design your ideal.
Yeah.
And that ideal means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For me, my ideal was being a working mom. I wanted to work. I wanted to have that contribution to access my brain and to make an impact on others. And I wanted to be in the front row of every single school event that was out there.
Oh, that's awesome. It's such a big thing too. I mean, for folks that are making that leap into entrepreneurship, hopefully, folks like myself have been able to get into a place where you can kind of create your own schedule. I'm a workaholic. I mean, I just am. And I was a workaholic when I worked in somebody else's office, and I'm a workaholic in my office. I try not to be. I try to tame it down. I try to tame it back, and I try to build, help into the business. And there's been good times and there's been challenging times. Part of being an entrepreneur is that you do need to, at times, just roll up your sleeves and get it done. Because if you don't, there's not really anybody else that can do it for you, right? And I think one of the absolute pleasures of entrepreneurship for me has been seeing my kids as they come home. So can you just talk to me a little bit about your transition? You talked about coming out of college, being an accountant, getting into it. I think one thing that I kind of sort of loved that you highlighted, which you didn't talk too much about, was sort of the thinking that you had around money, which I think, from the accounting side, from the entrepreneurship side, as people are into their businesses, getting the positive thinking around, hey, making a profit is something that is good, because a business should make profit, right? But getting your mindset around that, right? Good money mindset is such a big deal, because we grow up with these sort of negative ideas around what money means and having money, and, money is the root of all evil. And if you're rich, you're not a nice person, and right, all these pieces to it. So talk to us about moving from, and I love the story about you getting laid off and getting picked up immediately. How did that actually transition into you becoming an entrepreneur?
So when I figured out what I was meant to do, and it was on this trip to Tokyo where I really found that calling. And I finally found that cross between that 6th grade passion for teaching and that lifelong need for financial stability. And, it was adult education. So, and by the way, I also taught at NYU, and I have gone back to high schools and done programs because I still want to reach the youth. I just needed to do it in a way that worked for my ideal lifestyle. So how did I do it? I was not an employee for the bank that picked me up after I got laid off. I was a consultant for them. And as such, I had flexibility. So when I figured out my calling and what I was meant to do, I started to think about, well, how do I get there? And every day was, what's one thing I can do? It wasn't like, let me jump off the cliff. It was, well, what's one relationship I can make? What's one lead I can pursue? What's one, build a business card, or, work on a website, or even come up with a company name. It was little things. And I did them on the side while I was doing both jobs for the bank. So I was doing all that finance stuff, working on the trading floor, only woman on the trading floor, by the way. And he was also, the CEO was saying, okay, I want to teach people how to give effective feedback, Michelle. Go take a course on it and then teach it in New York and Tokyo. Sure. Oh, Michelle, we want to teach people how to interview. We need to do some hiring. Go take a course. And I would then write a course for the bank, and I would go back and forth and teach it. And I was like, this is heaven. And while I was doing the finance side of job, there was a company that we were using as a vendor to help us with the risk management platform. And I'm at a meeting with them one day, and they said, oh, we're looking for a director of marketing. And I'm like, oh my God, everyone I know has been laid off, because, this is 2001, I think, or so at this point. And I'm like, everyone I know has been laid off. Tell me what you're looking for. I know someone, right? Connector mindset. And about 45 minutes later, I'm going, wait a minute, are you offering me a job? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, I don't know anything about marketing. And they're like, yes, you do. And I said, okay, but I promised my current boss I'd go back out to Japan for this meeting. No problem, we'll wait. I said, okay, but this would be a short-term plan for me. I'm building this on the side. This is, where I want to go. Not a problem, Michelle, we'll give you flexibility. And I'm thinking, if some company has this much faith that I can do whatever they need me to do, and I'm being completely transparent with the needs that I have for what I'm trying to create, all right. So I said yes, I jumped on board. And while I was working at this startup, there was only 5 people in the company. And by the way, that company's been acquired at this point. I got my appointment to NYU and I went to the CEO and I said, okay, I have given 2 sessions. Which time do you want me to teach? And they picked their time, and I would leave early every Thursday and Tuesday to teach my class at NYU. And I landed my first client, which was JP Morgan. Not a bad first client.
Not at all. Not at all.
And I would say, I'm taking tomorrow off. I would take a vacation day and I would go teach at JP Morgan for the day. And so it was that transparency, that flexibility, that openness. And I still did everything that I needed to do for whoever I was working for at that time. And so by the time I actually left, which I did not fully leave my finance job, I started going part-time in 2005. At the beginning of 2005, I was 5 days a week, 1 quarter in, 4 days a week, 2 quarters in, 3 days a week. And by the 3rd quarter, I was not only on my own, but I was about 6 months pregnant with my first child.
So, because I think that's a really interesting part of the story. And Alexandria was saying, I wanted to be a working mom as well. I cherish both roles. So she's right with you while we're talking this stuff out. But as we're talking about networking and connecting today, something that I've noticed and something that I heard in what you were saying is, as you were taking on these different roles, because if your point for networking is to build your business and to get more opportunities and take advantage of what the world has to offer, I think a big part of that is, if I make a commitment, especially if I'm having a conversation and a networking conversation at an event, on a face-to-face call, deliver on that commitment and deliver it in a way where either, one, I'm making the commitment and I stay true to it, or don't make the commitment at all, right? Don't put myself in a position where my word is going to mean less after our connection, right, than before we even started, right? So doing things in a way where you are consistent brings that momentum. The momentum leads to all these, lucky opportunities, right?
I actually started my book by saying I'm not lucky. My first book, I'm like, I'm not lucky. But you said something else about, follow up and follow through. And what you're really talking about is one of the mindsets of a connector, which is conscientiousness. So there's 7 mindsets of a connector. And for all the people out there that are already doing it and trying to build their business and get that next client and get that next referral, this is how, right? Being a connector and embodying that mindset is going to get you faster, easier, better results. And I got stats behind it. So people are 4 times more likely to buy when referred by a friend. 92% of people trust those referrals and reviews, right? So that word of mouth. Obviously, people want to do business with people they like. So there's just so many statistics.
We're going to come back to this. I didn't want to interrupt your story. You were getting right into it as you were getting.
I know, but you're talking about conscientiousness.
We got time though. We'll come back to it. But put it on the screen. And Alexandria's also got a question, but I don't want to put it on the screen until we get through your story. So we ended off with your 6 months pregnant. Let's go from there.
Okay. So it's 2005. I am very, very pregnant. I am now departing the finance firm fully. I'm 100% on my own. I am putting my husband through business school. So I'm paying that bill. I now don't have a job. I am, cooking a baby. Oh, and, also caring for my 90-plus-year-old grandparents and moving them up from Florida. So there was a lot on my plate. And when I did that leap, if we call it a leap, because honestly, at that point, it was really just one more step, because I'd taken so many steps up to the edge of that cliff that I didn't have to jump, right? I was already there, and I already had my appointment at NYU. So I was teaching 2 classes a year, and that brought in some money. I was already on the faculty of the American Management Association. I was already on the faculty of Rutgers Executive Education. And I already had not just my first client of JP Morgan, but my second client of Deutsche Bank and my third client of Morgan Stanley. And, so I had some of my own business. So I had and it was a numbers game. I knew the numbers that I needed to make in order to not dip into a savings account. And I had what I call my base covered. And through those relationships and through those appointments, my base was covered and everything else was, okay, now I'm growing. So that's when I kind of made that leap and started doing it on my own. And I'll roll forward the story a little bit. My second child, my kids are only 17 months apart. So I was, my first child I had, business wasn't that busy. I could go to the mommy and me classes and I could take a client here. And you get pregnant with your second child, business starts to grow. And I remember going to an event where I was speaking at a bank and getting my first bout of morning sickness, and the client calling, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm in a cab, I'm on my way," And I was doing a lot of work for this client, and I ended up going into labor in front of that audience at a later program. They didn't know. They didn't know that I was having contractions in front of them. But I remember.
My good friend Steve Spiro talks about grit. That is grit, my friend. That is grit.
So yeah, and one of the things I will say is sometimes we don't have that clear vision. And again, another one of the mindsets of a connector is having a clear vision. I don't have a 10-year vision. And I find that whole, especially with the college essay, what do you want to do in 5 years? Or what did you want to do with you? I don't know. I think about the next thing. And I sometimes think that, yes, we can think really far, but sometimes that becomes overwhelming and that holds us back. If we think about just the next step, we can continue that movement, and then you see how far you've come.
I love that. I love that. So amazing that you were able to transition from this life where you were kind of, at the whim of others, and you made this life for yourself. I love it. And you've taken on some amazing clients. Let's talk a little bit about, the takeaways that you have here. I think you brought up the 7 mindsets of a connector. So let's jump right into that, and then we'll follow that up with anyone can be a connector and all that. But talk to us about the 7 mindsets of a connector. And I also, maybe even before we just jump into that, I know I love to throw a lot at people, but Alexandria Rosa said, "How can we convey our love for connecting others in a way that people won't think we are being strategic or have ulterior motives?" And just to sort of support her on this, I do a lot of connecting around Biz Dev Live. A lot of messages go out, and I'll get a lot of back of like, well, what's the fee for this show? Or what's the, because people just expect that the other shoe is going to drop. And I hate that. I mean, to me, if you're selling something, be open about it. I'm certainly open about the fact that, I do this show because I love it. But I know where Alexandria is talking about in terms of conveying that. It's tough to reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, I'm not charged," because then that sounds salesy, right? It sounds like you're gonna bait and switch or something. So it's really tough sometimes. It's just I genuinely love connecting people, but some people don't get it. Or should I even care? And I think we might get part of the answer right there. I think she knows it, right? But talk to us about Alexandria's question, and then we'll get into the 7 pieces here.
Well, Alexandra, I love that you love connecting, because that is actually, in the research I did, the biggest differentiator between a connector and a non-connector was just that personal satisfaction from making the connection for others. So you have that. And what I would say is that we build a reputation for being a connector. And when you connect others, connect them with the information of why, right? So, hey, I think you might want to meet this person, and here's why. And hey, I think you want to connect with this person, and here's why for you. And sometimes it's, I'm not sure what you guys might do together, but as I talked to you, I thought you guys would enjoy a conversation. So I'm putting you in touch. And again, if you tell them why it is for them and you're not even part of that, then they're not sitting there like looking at you because you've already answered the question for them. And as far as should you even care? Look, if people don't appreciate the value of an introduction, because that's one of the greatest gifts you can give somebody else, is the endorsement of you being willing to connect them to somebody else. And if they don't appreciate that, then that might not be somebody that you want to continue to connect with others, because they don't know how to, excuse me.
You're good. You're good. Thank you.
They don't know how to put the connector's mindset first. They don't know how to be relationship focused. And that's, maybe it's something that they can learn.
And I think we're all hungry for feedback. And I think most of us appreciate critical feedback. We know that feedback can sometimes matter more than the praise, because that's how we grow. But I think we also, as humans, tend to really gravitate and focus on negative criticism, feedback. I know I had one guy, this was because I'm hiring a lot of staff right now. And so we had a couple of conversations on the phone. One of them happened to be while I was doing daddy duties. Another one, in the middle of the conversation, I was doing spousal duties, right? And it just the luck of the draw. This guy happened to be on the phone with me. It didn't help that he wasn't very congenial or super easy to talk to. And so he left that conversation with a bad taste in his mouth. He's emailing me back. He's saying I'm a jerk. That piece of it, I think when you're talking to somebody like that and you know that you didn't do anything, certainly in your heart of hearts, you weren't intending to do wrong. I definitely remember moments in my life where I focused on that kind of feedback. And I didn't focus on, the 20 other positive phone calls, the client calls, the staff that, and if you're not willing to pay at least as much attention to the majority of positive feedback in your life as that one negative conversation in your day, you have to adjust your scales. I think you have to really sort of say, hey, I'm focusing on the wrong thing here. Let me really focus on the positive things that move me forward, the things that really heighten the level of my joy in my day. Let me not focus on people that no matter who they're getting in contact with, they're probably not making a better day for them.
There's so many things that came to my mind as I listened to this. One of them is that we tend to hyper focus on those that we don't have with us. So I know as a speaker and a trainer, I would always sense the one person in the room who I've lost, and I would hyper focus, and it would eat me alive. And it took me a long time to really shift my focus to the 90% of the people in the room that were with me, because you can't get them all. And that's part of my work on likability.
So important, right? Just that idea of, and I as an educator, right, being in the NYU classrooms, I've been, in the college and career environment, and I remember, and I know as a person there looking at other people doing that, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, we're focusing on the wrong people in the room. These 40 people showed up. They're on time. Why are we talking about the 2 people that are late and wasting everybody else's time dwelling on that? The majority did what they needed to do. Let's focus on these other 2 at an offside, or even ignore them, because we need to focus on the people that are doing the right thing and reward them for paying attention, for being there on time, for contributing, for being there with their whole selves. So important. I love that.
I always say you can't make somebody like you, but you can enable them to see what is likable about you. And, when we, have one of these exchanges where somebody's like saying you're a jerk, you've got options. My feeling is I make one attempt to smooth out that communication, but it takes 2. And if there isn't a desire by the other half, then you can only feel good about how you responded and how you communicated within an interaction. So the other thing that when you talked about all that feedback and focusing on the negative is I want to shift the language that we all use because we're so used to this word feedback. And feedback is about the back past that's happened. And Marshall Goldsmith, and I think you mentioned in my bio that I'm one of the Marshall Goldsmith 100 coaches. And he has coined the phrase feed forward. And I love this. And as I do executive coaching and I pull in information that I'm seeking feedback for one of my clients, I'm always saying, what I'm looking for here is feed forward. What are the actions, behaviors that are observable that you would like to see, right? Instead of complaining about what they did before, tell me what you'd like to see them do differently. Because the only reason to go backward is to be able to influence forward.
I love
and
it.
I love that comment, Yolanda. Focus on the people that feed you. Love that.
Yolanda's awesome. Awesome member of the community. And then we have, he's not showing up because he hasn't given permission to StreamYard yet, but Jamie Villanova, who says, what are some quick tips on how to remember people's names?
I promised Jamie, he reached out to me ahead of time. I promised him I would answer him live. So the funny thing is I mentioned earlier, I'm photographic for numbers, but I am not photographic for anything else. And I'm actually terrible with names. But if you've ever been in my audience, you know that if there is, less than 50 people in the room, I'll probably remember every single person's name. And it really throws people. They're like, how do you do that?
My jaw is ready to drop right now. That is pretty good.
And one of the ways that we do that is that we make it important to us. If we really care about that, then it is front of mind. And what happens is I get so caught up in the introduction, I forget immediately 2 seconds later somebody's name. And so when that happens, I will immediately ask, I'm like, tell me your name again. Instead of doing the very obvious, Cameron. So Cameron, and like, it's so obvious that you're forcing yourself to say somebody's name 4 times so that you remember it. If that works for you, fine, but don't make it so obvious. So you can be like, we're just talking about Cameron and a little less obvious goes a long way. But what I actually have a few techniques that do work for me. One is I repeat the name back to them to make sure I heard it correctly. Sometimes I'll even ask for spelling because for me, the visualization of the letters helps me with the pronunciation. I also use rhyming. I am a huge fan of rhyming. So if I get somebody's name and it might be a more challenging name, I find a word that rhymes with it so that I can then say like, I think there was this waitress once and her name was Astasia. And in my head, I'm like, Fantasia, and so then I could go Fantasia, Astasia. And like that brings it back to me. Other things that I will do are if they have a name that I associate with somebody else. So I met somebody named Judy and I'm like, I have an Aunt Judy. And so then I visualize Aunt Judy when I look at them. And so it's the associations. Other people, and by the way, there's some amazing people out there with memory. I am not somebody who can memorize everything. It's that I use some techniques and you won't remember them all. But sometimes what I'll say is, give me the first letter when I go around learning people's names. And, if they give me the first letter, I can then recall the name that they said. So it's how you think about how your memory works. Do you need to put yourself back into the place where you were when you heard it? Are you hearing it? Do you need to visualize it to see it like on a name card or to visualize the way it's spelled? And then sometimes, you tell like a little story about somebody. So, John, it's a very simple name and everyone's named John. And how am I going to remember John? So I might say, I see John's wearing long johns and going skiing or something like that. And I'll give myself a sentence or a scenario or a visual. And picture that person in the long johns going skiing.
And I think, for folks, parents here, right? If you've ever been at the playground or you're doing school functions, if you're anything like me and you get introduced to these parents, whether it's business or personal life, you run into the same situation and there's nothing worse, right? You're running into these parents over and over again. The kids may play together, they're friends, they're talking about them all the time. And you can't remember this mother or this father's name that you're running into, but having some of these things, right? As you were saying, repeating the name, doing it maybe in some less some less significant ways than just like repeating it over again, using it in conversation. I find myself, rather than saying goodbye to somebody, I try to use their name when I'm saying goodbye, and actually using the name in conversation, which sort of gets me into a place where I'm thinking, I don't think this person remembers my name anymore, but that's neither here nor there. And then you try to work some way of saying your name to sort of help them out, because I think we all suffer from this challenge, right? Of, we're bumping into people and we don't want to feel like we're being rude. But I also know, and you didn't mention this, but I think people are almost never insulted that you're asking them their name. Now, there's obviously levels of that. You may have been insulted. Somebody should know you. We talked to me. What do you mean they don't know your name, right? But I think we all have brain spasms. And so giving people kindness when they're asking your name and remembering that you're going to need that kindness later is a big deal. But asking their name immediately, if you did miss it, right, is such a big deal. That's a good moment. If you missed it the first time around, to say, hey, I didn't catch your name. Using in conversation, rhymes. I love all of those techniques. So hopefully we answered Jamie's question really well there.
I'll give you one more. Sometimes I just own that I'm going to forget. And as soon as they introduce yourself, I'll say something like, I'm going to forget your name in 5 minutes and ask you again. Okay.
There you go. Right. You're setting up the expectations, and you always win with setting up the expectations. I love that. All right, let's jump into this takeaway here. 7 mindsets of a connector. Talk to us about what these 7 mindsets of a connector are.
Okay. So I'll kind of give you the order of the book, but what I want to make clear is that these mindsets are not linear, right? They enable each other. So connectors are open and accepting. They have a clear vision. They trust. They come from a place of abundance. They are social and curious, they are conscientious, and they have a generous spirit. And yes, I have to count to make sure I get all 7 of them. And the funny thing is, as we talked, some of these concepts naturally came up. When you talked about, the follow-up and the follow-through and your reputation, that's conscientiousness. When you talked about setting boundaries and being clear on what you want to say yes to and what you want to say no to, in a way, that's being generous with yourself, as well as being conscientious. Yes. We talked about having a clear vision. So these are things that are innate. And, when I was writing this book, my brother-in-law walks in my office and he's like, oh, another networking book. I'm like, no, this one's about being a connector. He's like, well, what's the difference? And I look at him, I'm like, well, that's a good question. And I said, well, networking is something you do, but a connector, that's who you are. And that's the distinction between, oh, I'm going to go do this thing networking right now because I need this, I want this, I'm trying, right? And when it's strategic, that's when we get those people kind of feeling like, ooh. But when it's the way of life and the mindset with which we approach everything that we do, and that these mindsets are infused into the way in which we conduct ourselves, it's totally different.
Yeah, no, and you feel it when you're dealing with a person that's purely interested in networking for their own sake versus somebody that's really interested in helping growing you through connection, right? And I think those people become much more valuable in your network because you understand that they get excited, when they connect people. I know I get excited when I'm able to make an introduction, and I'm excited talking to people that make introductions. I talk a lot on this show and on the Master Connector show with Steve Spiro about, I may be, 321 episodes of Biz Dev Live, 61 episodes, on social media, there's this sort of extroverted personality that people get to see. But when I'm invited to a cocktail networking event, my anxiety starts going, the sweats start building in me. And there are days when I don't go out the door because of my apprehension at attending that event, because to me, walking up to a table of people that I don't really know well or at all is nerves inducing. It's not something that's fun for me. I'd rather talk to people that I know that already, I don't want to feel like I have to perform to find out whether somebody likes me or not. And I know that people will feel that in different ways, but it's challenging. And so getting to that place where you walk into the event and there's somebody that's there that knows you and is introducing, oh man, it melts.
That's the best.
Yeah.
And you can be that person, by the way. So, and as I was listening to you, I was actually feeling like, oh, I'm tired, right? And I'm an extrovert and I miss those in-person things. And even there's times where I'm just like, I don't have the energy. Like, I just don't have the energy. And it does take energy. So one of the things that you can think about, and it's probably the third takeaway that I shared, which is that we want to expand and diversify our connections. And a diversified network is exponentially more powerful because it gives us access to different people, industries, levels, ideas. The access is just exponentially broader when you diversify. And when you're in a space where you're meeting new people, you can have a host mindset. And as a host, you look to make other people comfortable in an environment. And even if you don't know them, what you can do is say, hey, I see that you are on your own. Let me help you meet some other people. Who would you like to meet? And then you don't have to know the people to do that, but then you become the connector for others.
Talk to me one more time. Just list off the 7 mindsets, just so we get a clean list for people here, and they can write it down and scribble down their notes here.
You got it. And I'll hold up. I have a little bookmark here so you can see them. They are open and accepting. What is it? Is it focusing? I don't know.
It's good.
They have a clear vision. They believe in abundance. They trust. They are social and curious, conscientious, and have a generous spirit.
I love that. And I love the abundance mindset. I think that's such a big deal for people to understand that the world is truly abundant. Going back to Alexandria's comment earlier about, should you care? If you're in a place of abundance, you understand that and going back to Yolanda's comment, right? Focus on the people that feed you, right? Going back to Alexandria, if you're in an abundance mindset, you understand there are people that are ready to accept what you have. They need what you have. So by focusing on the people that are negative or offensive, you're not serving the people that need you. And that's such a big deal.
Well, the opposite of abundance is scarcity. And as I've shared, with my origin story, finances were a scarcity in my upbringing. And so the reason why an abundant mindset is so difficult is because scarcity is tangible. We've experienced it. It's painful. It's real. Whereas abundance is theoretical. It's an idea, a concept, a hope, a belief, a faith. And there's no proof. It's intangible. So that shift from scarcity to abundance is a very difficult shift to make. And it's probably one of the most difficult for me to make. So a few tactics to shift to abundant mindset. And the first and probably the hardest for most of us is stop comparing yourself to anybody else. There's always somebody who's doing more, better, and there's always somebody who's not. But if we are constantly in that comparison mode, that puts us in a scarcity framework and it makes us defensive. It makes us protective. I have a saying, when people's like, who's your competition? I'm like, I don't have any competition. I don't have competitors. Anyone and everyone who's in my industry are potential strategic partners and alliances and collaborators. And that's how I view the world. It doesn't mean that I don't get jealous when one of my good collaborators lands a client that I wish I had gotten, and I'm super jealous. You have those moments, but then you're able to put that away and say, okay, how did you do that? What can I learn from you? And do you need any help? And I actually tell that story in the book because jealousy is not that you can't ever feel it. It's just that you know how to put it in its place a little bit. And the other practice that I think is extremely valuable for me in adopting an abundant mindset is the practice of gratitude. And I know this has been something that's been written about and talked about, and I want to simplify it because I don't gratitude journal and I don't have huge habits around gratitude. I make it very simple. And I want to also influence my children with this mindset. And so what we used to do are, highs and lows. What are your highs and lows of the day? Best part and worst part of the day. And it became where it was always a venting, complaining session. So I stopped doing that. And I simply said, what's the best part of your day? And that was a way to shift the emphasis on the good stuff. And there's a little, those little wooden signs that have sayings on them. I have one in my son's room. It says, today might not be a good day, but there's good in every day. And so my question to him became, what was the good in today?
Yeah.
And that's a very simple practice of gratitude.
I love it. And I can't state enough. If you're in your gratitude, it becomes a lot more difficult to be stressed. It becomes a lot more difficult to be filled with anxiety. If I go back and apply that to myself, if I am in my attitude of gratitude that I know about the networking meeting, that I got invited to the networking meeting, I'm so, gratified that I'll have the opportunity to go and meet new people. If I'm in that place and not in the place of, oh my goodness, I'm nervous about somebody may judge me, right? If I'm not in those places, if I'm staying in that attitude of gratitude, life becomes a lot easier and a lot more joyful. I love it. All right, so let's talk about this final one, because I think we talked about anyone can be a connector, but connecting is a spectrum, and expanding and diversifying connections is beneficial. I think this is a place where, on LinkedIn and in general on social media, I think this is something that people sort of know, but don't necessarily apply themselves on. So I'd love you to sort of talk to that piece of it, of, ever expanding that network, because I feel like, the more people that you're connected to, the more opportunities, the more luck is going to happen for you. And obviously you want to be somewhat strategic about it, but expanding that network, I feel like, is almost never a bad thing. And diversifying that network is almost never a bad thing.
It is not. And I'm going to take these two together because I think it's important for everybody to hear that anyone can be a connector. When I actually started doing the research, I thought that it was, the book title was originally called The Connectors Club. I thought it was a certain way that you're wired, but no. The only differentiator was that satisfaction that we talked about with Alexandra. Really, a lot of the, emotional intelligence, locus of control, political savvy, all those things, all of those things really didn't differentiate much between the connectors and the non-connectors. So what I realized is that anybody can adopt the mindsets and behaviors that enable you to put relationships first. Okay, so it doesn't matter, introvert, extrovert. Some of the best connectors I know are introverts. You can do this. And the other piece of it is you're already doing this. And that's why I talk about it being a spectrum. And actually, hopefully Cameron has a link to the quiz. I've got a 3-minute quiz, and my website's up there. You can find it if you go to my website. It's a free little 3-minute quiz to tell you where you are on the connector spectrum, from non-connector, which you're not because you're here, to emerging connector, to responsive connector, to acting connector, or to the upper echelons, which are the niche super and global super connectors. So the idea is that there's 2 levers we can pull. One is the initiation versus responsiveness of being a connector, right? So a responsive connector is just taking the requests in and responding to them, whereas an acting connector is also initiating the ideas, right? So I think there was somebody on here who says, I love to make those connections. She's initiating, not just responding. The second lever is where we come to this other idea, which is expanding and diversifying. And that's the breadth and the depth. So when you go deep, like in an industry, in a geography, in a function, even in a company, she knows everyone, he knows everyone in blank. That's a niche connector, right? And that's a depth. When we go broad, we can be a super connector. And broad is up and down the ladder, across industry, across demography, across education, across all of those demographics and differences that seem obvious. That's when you are a super connector. And if you cross your country's borders, you're a global super connector. So thinking about how I connect and interact with, and I'm socially, curious about people who are not in this little niche that I'm living in. That's expansion.
I love it. And I love the idea, because, I as you were talking, I was talking, and thinking in my brain, how do I kind of fit into this? And so, I'm in the hospitality industry, the events catering industry specifically. And so I both am a person that has a lot of contacts, but in my business, I find as I'm getting questions from clients and collaborators, I could have more. I could have more people that I could recommend. And so part of, my daily grind or to-do list is building out those connections for people that not only can I recommend to clients, but those connections provide opportunities. So if you're within an industry, you can think about those things. And, I recommend the Go Giver. I'm about to ask, I know that you would recommend your books to people. So talking about your books, but I know when you had submitted this, you talked about How Women Rise, which I think is an amazing title for a book. So definitely looking for you to talk to us. But I really, really, really am fascinated with this idea that you can service your clients through your connections. So there's that piece of the business piece of it. And then on the super connector, master connector kind of piece of it, as you're networking, to be able to collect people. And I find my biggest challenge, going back to the name thing, is I do know a person. What the hell was their name? Right? And so finding ways to categorize people and find and search and organize your contact list is a really big deal. Adding notes in, not waiting till later, but
the notes is everything.
Yes.
Because I also, I have that same experience, and you want to make that connection, and I'm completely with you. A lot of times I'll be asked, to speak at an event or to do something, and I'm either not available or maybe it's not my budget. So I'm always saying, like, well, tell me what you're looking for. Maybe I can connect you to somebody else. And when you do that, you are adding value in both directions. So the person that you're referring in appreciates that so much. And the person who isn't hiring you and you are not getting anything from it, that you're still willing to put in a little time, a little extra effort. And I will tell you that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes that company will come back and say, hey, we couldn't afford you for this event, but we're having this bigger event, and we have a budget for you for that. And so it is saying, it's not all about me. It is about how I can, serve this person, this relationship, add value, and have a generous spirit and help. And that feels good.
And I love mentioning the Go Giver is where I was going on the books, but the idea that if you stay open to receiving, that is such a big deal, because as you're connecting people, as you're giving of yourself, you will get it back. But if you're expecting it only in one type of way, that's going to limit you. Whereas if you just give freely and stay open to all the types of receiving that are possible, which could be through the client referral, they just feel so great that you connected with them. They want to connect with you, and making it easy for people. So I'll say this in terms of the networking thing, you're the pro here, but I think you'll wholeheartedly agree with this. If you want people to find your website, find your calendar link, find your phone number, find your email, make it easy. Make it easy. Make sure it's the signature on your email. Make sure that if you're texting somebody, you identify yourself. Make it easy to remember your name, to remember how to get in contact with you, to remember your business. Be memorable in that sense, because that's going to help people, because they're having the same trouble you are. Who, where, how do I, right? If you make that easy. And to that point, I dropped into the comments your website so people can find you. Michelle, will you let people know, first of all, the books that they can pick up to explore more on the 7 mindsets of a connector, as well as the 11 ways to be likable, in addition to how they can find you and connect with you? I hope that more people will connect with you through LinkedIn, through the show. And I hope for everybody that's watching this show, you are doing what this show is designed to do. Connect with people in the comments, connect with Jamie, connect with Yolanda, connect with Alexandria. We so appreciate you being in the audience and helping us make this show more memorable today. Go ahead, Michelle. I'm going to leave you with the last word, and I'll play us off with the Biz Dev.
I love when people reach out and connect with me and tell me that you heard me on Biz Dev Live. So you can go to my website, and from there you can get to all the social media, but LinkedIn is my favorite. I started a LinkedIn newsletter, so you can subscribe there and, take the quiz. I send lots of freebies out there. But my books, The Connector's Advantage, which is on this side, they do the reverse thing, and the 11 Laws of Likability are really what we've been talking about today. And remember, you can't make anybody like you, but you can enable them to see what is likable about you. So keep connected and connect with me.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm going to play this off with the Biz Dev Live. Hold on for 1 second. I'll talk to you right after the theme plays.
Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time, live. Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration, Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, business development, not even selling it. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. This is business development, not even selling it. This is business development, not even selling it. Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live, Biz Dev Live.